Mark uploaded the photo of the forest altar, and an hour later he was sent a picture of himself sleeping in his locked apartment. He stared at the screen, the blue light of the smartphone illuminating the cold sweat beating on his forehead. The timestamp on the received message was 4:12 p.m. He had been taking a nap then, exhausted from the hike. The angle of the photograph was high and steep, taken from the top shelf of the open closet directly across from his bed. It showed his slack jaw, the messy duvet, and the vulnerability of a man unconscious in his own sanctuary. Mark sat on the edge of the mattress, his heart hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird. He looked up at the closet. It was empty now, save for a few hanging flannel shirts and a shoebox. The apartment was silent. The only sound was the hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen and the frantic thumping of his own pulse in his ears. He was 28, a man who prided himself on rationality, a man who hiked alone to clear his head from the noise of the internet. But he was also a man who craved validation. Earlier that day, 3 miles off the marked trail in the density of the Mississippi woods, he had found it. It was not just a pile of bones. It was a cathedral of rot. Femurs, ribs, and skulls, some deer, some unidentifiable, were lashed together with rot-resistant wire and black roots, forming a grotesque, spiraling tower around an ancient oak. The air around the thing had been stagnant, heavy with a metallic taste that coated the back of his throat. His instinct, primal and screaming, had been to run. Instead, he had pulled out his iPhone 15 Pro. The lens flared. The shutter clicked. He took 20 photos, capturing the texture of the marrow, the strange geometry of the construction, the way the shadows seemed to pool unnaturally around the base. Now, sitting in his dim bedroom, Mark looked at the Reddit thread, r/high strangeness. The post was titled, "Found this about 3 miles deep in the woods. Felt like I was being watched." It had been up for 60 minutes. It already had 4,000 upvotes. His thumb hovered over the notification banner. The text message with the photo of him sleeping had come from a blocked number. No words. Just the image. "It's a prank," he whispered to the empty room, his voice cracking. "Jordan or Will followed me back. They broke in while I was asleep." But Jordan was in Colorado, and Will did not have a key. Mark stood up, gripping the phone tight enough to whiten his knuckles. He went to the front door. The deadbolt was thrown. The chain was on. He checked the windows, painted shut for years. There was no way in. And yet, someone had been in his closet 2 hours ago. A new notification chimed from Reddit. A comment from a user named OldRoot66. "Delete it. You did not just take a picture of the cage. You took the key. Take it down before it sees you." Mark felt a spike of irritation mix with his fear. Trolls. It was just internet roleplay. He looked at the karma counter ticking up. 5,000 upvotes. This was the viral hit he had been chasing for years. If he deleted it now, he lost the momentum. He lost the story. He typed a reply, "Nice try. Coordinates coming in the next update." He hit send. He chose the fame. The phone vibrated in his hand. A long, angry buzz. A new text message. Mark swallowed hard and opened it. It was not a photo of him sleeping this time. It was a photo of his feet, standing on the carpet, taken from directly underneath the bed he had just been sitting on. Mark threw himself backward, crashing into the dresser. His eyes locked on the dark gap beneath his bed. The dust ruffle swayed slightly, as if disturbed by a breath. He did not scream. The air had been sucked out of his lungs. He scrambled for the kitchen, his socks sliding on the hardwood, and grabbed the largest chef's knife from the magnetic strip. His hands were shaking so violently he almost dropped it. "Come out!" he yelled. The silence of the apartment swallowed his voice. He needed to check under the bed. He knew he had to. If there was someone there, an intruder, a stalker, he had to know. He dropped to his knees in the hallway, angling the phone's flashlight toward the bedroom. The beam cut through the darkness, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air. He crawled forward, inch by inch. The knife led the way. He reached the doorway. He took a breath that tasted of copper and fear, and whipped the phone down to illuminate the space under the mattress. Nothing. Just a rolling suitcase and a thick layer of dust. The dust was undisturbed. No drag marks. No footprints. Mark sat back on his heels, confusion warring with terror. He looked at the photo on his phone again. It was undeniable. His gray socks, the pattern of the rug, the lighting, it was taken seconds ago. But the angle, the camera would have to be on the floor. The phone chimed again. Not a text this time. A system notification. A cloud storage full. 3 new items uploaded. He frowned. He had not taken any photos. He opened his camera roll. The 3 most recent photos were there at the bottom of the grid. The first was the back of his head, taken from the kitchen doorway while he was grabbing the knife. The second was a blurry motion shot of his hand holding the knife, taken from the ceiling corner of the hallway. The third was just blackness. He was not receiving these photos from a stalker anymore. His phone was taking them. Or rather, something was taking them, and they were appearing on his phone. He looked up at the ceiling corner. Nothing there but a spiderweb. Mark backed away into the living room, the center of the apartment, turning in a slow circle. He felt exposed like a specimen in a jar. The air in the apartment had grown cold, unnaturally so, carrying that same metallic, stagnant scent from the woods. He looked at the phone screen. The black photo, the third one, was not black. He turned the brightness up. It was a photo of the inside of his own pocket. Mark dropped the phone onto the couch as if it were burning hot. He backed away until his shoulders hit the wall. The phone sat on the cushions, the screen glowing. Ping. A new photo appeared on the lock screen. He could see the thumbnail from where he stood. It was a picture of him, Mark, standing against the wall, eyes wide with terror. The angle was impossible. It was taken from the perspective of the phone sitting on the couch. But the phone's camera was facing the ceiling. Mark stared at the device. The lens was not pointing at him. Yet the image on the screen showed him in perfect, grainy high definition. The perspective was shifting, zooming in on his face. The digital image was moving, adjusting focus like an eye dilating. He realized then that the threat was not in the apartment with him. It was not under the bed or in the closet. It was in the device. The screen was not just displaying light. It was an aperture, and something was looking through it. He lunged for the front door, abandoning the phone. He grabbed the deadbolt. It would not turn. The electronic smart lock keypad on the outside flashed red. System error. He yanked the handle. Locked. He kicked the door, bruising his heel. It did not budge. Behind him, the phone on the couch began to play a sound. It was the sound of dry leaves crunching, followed by a low, wet clicking noise. The sound of wood snapping. The sound of the altar. Mark scrambled back to the living room, his breathing shallow and jagged. He needed to destroy the phone. But as he reached for it, the screen changed. It was not taking photos of the room anymore. The gallery had opened itself, scrolling rapidly back to the source. Back to the morning. Back to the woods. It stopped on the main photo of the altar. The high-resolution image filled the screen. Mark froze. His hand hovered inches from the glass. In the safety of the daylight, he had just seen a pile of debris. But here, in the dark of his apartment, illuminated by the high-definition retina display, he saw the detail he had missed. The phone automatically zoomed in. It was not a glitch. It was guiding his eye. It zoomed in on the central skull. A deer skull, bleached white. Carved into the bone were not runes or symbols. The zoom went deeper until the pixels blurred. Mark gasped, a sound that ripped his throat. Embedded in the eye sockets of the deer skull were human eyes. Not carved. Real. Wet, glassy, and shockingly preserved. And they were not staring vacantly. In the photo, the pupils were focused directly at the camera lens. He understood. The realization hit him with the force of a physical blow. The comment on Reddit had been right. It was not a shrine. It was a prison. A Faraday cage of bone and blood meant to keep something pinned to that tree. By taking the photo, by capturing the image of the entity in digital code, Mark had created a bridge. He had not just copied the image, He had copied the containment failure. The entity did not travel through physical space. It traveled through the data. It was in the JPEG. "Delete it," Mark stammered, his fingers trembling as he tapped the screen. He hit the trash icon. Error. File in use. He tried again. Error. File in use. The eyes in the photo blinked. Mark screamed and threw the phone across the room. It smashed into the drywall but did not shatter. It landed screen up. Suddenly, the 60-inch smart TV mounted on the wall flickered to life. The black screen turned a brilliant, blinding white. Then the pixels rearranged themselves. The image of the altar appeared on the TV, 5 feet tall. The crunching sound of leaves erupted from the surround sound speakers, deafeningly loud. Then the laptop on his desk woke up. The tablet on the coffee table. Even the smart display on his fridge. Every screen in the apartment lit up with the same image. The altar. The room was bathed in the cold, artificial light of the screens. And from the television, the image began to change. The branches in the picture moved. The bones rattled. The figure that had been invisible in the woods, the thing the cage was meant to hold, began to pull itself out of the digital background. A shadow, long and distorted, stretched out from the TV screen and spilled onto Marcus' living room floor. It was not a shadow cast by light. It was a shadow made of static. Mark fell to his knees. He had nowhere to run. The technology he lived by had become the doorway. The shadow lengthened, reaching for his leg. Felt cold, like liquid nitrogen burning his skin. He looked at the upvote counter on the TV screen, visible in the corner of the mirrored Reddit post. 15,200 upvotes. He was not just the victim. He was the broadcaster. The cold burned through his jeans. The static shadow was climbing him, heavy and suffocating, smelling of ozone and old blood. Mark watched the pixels on the TV screen bulge outward, as if a hand were pressing against a membrane from the inside. He needed to cut the connection. But it was not just about the internet anymore. It was the light. The entity was made of the light emitted by the screens. It needed the phosphors, the LEDs, the pixels to manifest. Mark scrambled backward, kicking at the shadow. He grabbed a heavy brass lamp from the end table and hurled it at the TV. Crash. The screen shattered, a spiderweb of cracks obliterating the image of the altar. The shadow on the floor recoiled, shrinking back. The sound of crunching leaves stopped abruptly from that direction, only to scream louder from the laptop and the phone. Light? Mark hissed through clenched teeth. Kill the light. He scrambled to his feet, dodging the glow of the tablet on the coffee table. He ran to the hallway, toward the utility closet. The air was thickening, the static charge making his hair stand on end. He could feel eyes on him, thousands of them, watching from every LED in the room. He threw open the utility panel. He did not bother with individual switches. He grabbed the main breaker handle. A screech tore through the apartment, a digital feedback loop that sounded like a human scream digitized and corrupted. Mark yanked the lever down. Snap. The apartment plunged into absolute, crushing darkness. The laptop died. The fridge display died. The phone on the floor went black. The hum of electricity vanished, leaving a silence so profound it hurt his ears. Mark stood in the hallway, pressing his back against the breaker box, his chest heaving. He waited. He listened for the crunch of leaves. He listened for the click of bone. Nothing. Slowly, his eyes adjusted to the dark, but there was nothing to see. The shadows were just shadows now. The entity, deprived of its digital medium, had been severed from this physical space. Could not exist here without the carrier signal. He slid down the wall until he hit the floor, burying his face in his hands. He was safe. He had won. He just had to wait until morning, leave the house, and never touch a screen again. He let out a long, shaky breath, tears stinging his eyes. And then a thought struck him. A cold, quiet thought that was worse than the monster in the room. He had cut the power to his apartment. He had destroyed his screens. He was safe. But the post was still up. Mark sat in the dark, his mind racing. 15,000 upvotes. That meant at least 100,000 views. He pictured the teenagers scrolling in their beds, the night shift security guards bored at their desks, the early risers checking their feeds over coffee. He remembered the Save Image button. He was not the only one with the key anymore. He had made copies, thousands of them. In the silence of the dark apartment, Mark realized he had not stopped the invasion. He had simply closed his own door while opening the floodgates for the rest of the world. Somewhere in London, a girl was saving the photo to her camera roll. Somewhere in Tokyo, a man was zooming in on the strange carving on the skull. Mark sat in the safety of the dark, listening to the silence of his home, while outside, across the globe, a million screens began to flicker.